my world has come down and crushed me pretty much. That the body in the casket is not even your loved one. Specifically when the Biden administration did a hostage deal with the Islamic regime, where they gave them $6 billion for 5 hostages. They left back at least 3 hostages that I know, one of them my father, who at that time had a death sentence. Where is NATO? Evacuated hundreds of thousands of Syrians out of their homes because there was war, because they wanted to protect them. But in this case, what did NATO do? Nothing. What did the UN do? Nothing.
4 years of imprisonment, 4 years of uncertainty, and then suddenly an execution. Or was it? First, regime in Iran claimed that they had executed him. Then they said he died in a natural death. The truth, still a mystery. And the Sharmahd family is left in darkness, fighting for answer, fighting for justice. Tonight, I speak once again with Gazelle Sharmahd, the daughter of Jamshid Sharmahd, a journalist, activist, and political prisoner. The last time we spoke, her father was still alive, held hostage by the Iranian regime. But shortly after that interview, she received the worst news imaginable. Her father was gone. What really happened? What has she's been through since that moment? Has she received support from governments, or she faced pushback and betrayal? What does she think of Ayatollah's influence in the Middle East and the world? And why isn't this story receiving global attention? There are also allegations that her father was involved in a terrorist attack in Iran. The regime even published video footage of him supposedly confessing. How much of that is true? Is that fabricated? Is there more to this story than the mainstream media wants to admit? Gazelle, welcome back.
Thank you so much.
Last time we spoke, I was so impressed by your story that I forgot lots of my important questions. So this time I wrote a few questions down so I don't forget them. But first of all, how are you, and what has happened since our first talk?
Wow, since we last spoke, the world has changed. So many things has changed. My world has come down and crushed me pretty much. You have to imagine you're fighting for 4 years to save your father from monsters, from terrorists who kidnap him, torture him, and want to murder him. And then they announce, or boasted pretty much to the world, that they had executed him. You can tell like how shameless they are and how little they have to fear retaliation by any other powers, that they are so bluntly coming out and saying, we executed him. When I heard the news, I was shocked, even though we knew for 4 years that this can happen, this will happen if our governments in Germany and the US will not pressure the Islamic regime to release my father. They will murder him one way or another, because nobody can survive 4 years in torture, 4 years of solitary confinement, 4 years of no medical treatment. And my father, as strong as he was, as long as he held on, you cannot do that forever. So we received the news as a shock to everybody. And there was an international outcry and condemnation. And the German government had to show a response based on that. They closed down the embassies. I'm sorry, not the embassy, the consulates in Germany of the Islamic regime. And they promised more harsher reactions, which we're still waiting for. But that was the news on October 28th last month, 4 months ago. And what happened since then was another nightmare, because in contrast to our governments, we know the Islamic regime. We know you cannot trust terrorists with their words. We know when they say something, something else is probably true. So our first reaction was, I don't want any condolences. Like my governments in Germany and America called me with condolences. You know, you have to imagine you go from 4 years of doing nothing to save your hostage to calling the family and saying, we're so sorry, and here's our condolences. That was so unacceptable. And I asked, how do you know my father is dead? How do you know how they murdered him? Were you there? Did you investigate? Did you see my father's body? What proof do you have that these terrorists are saying the truth? Maybe he is alive. Maybe he was murdered. How was he murdered? Like all of these questions that a government should ask to protect its citizen, we had to ask our government. And we had to put pressure together with the international community to bring his remains home so we can do an autopsy and even verify, is this my father? How was he murdered? What happened to him? And all of those things. So that's what we've been struggling and fighting to do for the last 4 months. And we were successful to add that in January. They brought a casket to Berlin. And they told me that this is my father. Again, without any shred of proof, without an autopsy, without identification, DNA tests or anything. I am not sure. I cannot verify that. And we're waiting right now for the autopsy results.
Are they doing that in Germany?
You know, I don't know if you were following what was happening yesterday in Israel, where 4 slain hostages were brought back in caskets, just like my father, to Israel. Within 24 hours, Israel did an autopsy and verified actually what we fear the most, that the body in the casket is not even your loved one. So one of the hostages, Shiri Bibas, it was not her body. They did that within 24 hours, which is still devastating news for the family, but at least they had a government that did that for them. We had to request through our lawyer team that an autopsy is being done. We are still requesting and waiting. What are the results? And this is now a month, like since January till now, a month has passed and we're still waiting for results. Our government has not even spoken about the casket that arrived. It was nowhere to be found in the news. No government official in Germany or in America has acknowledged that, has given him the dignity, the respect of being a citizen that was kidnapped and murdered and brought back. So it is hard, but we are unfortunately still on our own, betrayed by our government that should be on our side, fighting to find out if this is my father and what has really happened to him.
Are they planning to do an autopsy and DNA examination?
So that's we requested that, and through our engagement, a German court declared that they were going to do it. So they did it last week. It was completed. They have not released.
Not even to you?
Results of it.
Not even to you? Why?
My lawyers for a whole week are calling them and trying to get the results, and it is very hard, to say the least, to get the results of the autopsy.
I don't understand it, but are there any other ways that you can pressure German government to get a result?
Our only pressure is always public pressure. People who care, who think this is outrageous, coming on our side, asking the government, journalists, sending the foreign ministry their inquiries and pressuring them into giving a statement, pressuring them that you can't just make this disappear. You can't just bring a casket back, not talk about it, keep the press out of it, and this problem will go away. It will not go away. We need you to give us answers. And the more people there are within the common society that ask for accountability from our government, let alone the Islamic regime that kidnapped and murdered him, the more power we have. So we're still on our own, but with a big network of activists and journalists and lawyers that are trying to get our government to do just the basics of decency, of finding out what happened to their citizen.
Could you tell us short the story of your father? But because lots of people don't know anything about your father, they think that he was a citizen of Iran. They think that he went to holiday to Iran for holiday to Iran. So could you tell us what happened? Who was your father and what happened to him?
My father, Jamshid Sharmahd, my hero, my role model, and one of my best friends. He was born in Iran, but he moved to Germany when he was 7 years old. He grew up in Germany. He grew up with all.
And it was before the 79.
It was before 79, before the Islamic coup. So he was born in Iran that was free, that had all of the rights that we had in the West. Of course, not ideal, but nothing was ideal in the 50s.
Now, I think it was much more ideal than the rest of the world in Iran at that time. But why did he go to Germany? Was that any special reason?
It was just a family decision. My grandparents separated. My grandfather moved to Germany, and my grandmother moved to America, actually. And my dad went with his father, and he grew up in Germany with his German stepmother. So he was very, growing up like us, pretty much, like in the West with all the freedoms that we had. But he was, of course, never forgetting where he came from, and that he has family in Iran, and that they're brothers and sisters and all of these people that were over there. And he was watching, just like us, how the Islamists took over Iran, completely changed it, like overnight. People had to wear hijab. All of the rights were taken away. The constitution was nullified and Sharia law was brought in. The Islamists took over the ministries, like the human rights atrocities and all of those things that were happening. So before that happened, actually, before the coup happened, my father, shortly before, moved to Iran, married my mom, and I was born in Iran. And I was just 1 year old when the coup happened, and he was thinking this is the old Iran, and now he had a little daughter and saw all of this stuff happening to his country. And he understood, you cannot raise a daughter here. You cannot live in this society anymore. And we moved back to Germany. And then from Germany, after we grew up, we moved to America, where we're living now for the last 2 decades. So this is the personal story of my father. But my father was also a software engineer. He put himself through school. He created his own company. And with that knowledge that he had, he created a website for the people in Iran before we had social media. Now the people of Iran are using Twitter and Instagram and anonymous accounts to show us through citizen journalism what is going on inside of the country. Everything that the media is not showing us, the people are showing us. So before we had these social media platforms, there were websites. And my father created this website for the people of Iran, first to protect them, so to protect their IP addresses when they're logging in. They're completely anonymous. The regime cannot track them down and see who's engaging in activism and put them in jail. And second, he was teaching them, the new generation, about our history, about the Iranian identity, about things that they didn't know because they were growing up with the Islamic regime, which told them, you're Muslims, you're Islamists, your law is Sharia law. Like they were trying to change the identity and the history and the essence of the Iranian people. And my father was the antidote, telling them about history, telling them where they're coming from, telling them this is not what Iran was. And so that was a big, big threat to the regime in Iran. And when they see a threat, they react very harshly. So they tracked down my father. They sent us death threats. They threatened our family in Iran. And when my father didn't respond to these threats, and he kept the website alive and he kept being a voice for the people, they started to send assassins. They sent assassination teams to Los Angeles, where we live, to murder my father in 2009. And after that was foiled, thankfully, they tried one way or another to take his life, to completely silence him. So in 2020, unfortunately, he was on a flight overlay. He was traveling for business from Europe and Asia. Mm-hmm. He was traveling from Germany, actually, to India. He had a flight overlay in Dubai. So he did not plan to even go to Dubai. It was a pandemic. Flights were rerouted. In that time, in his few days that we had a layover, the regime sent their intelligence team. They snatched him from Dubai, took him to Oman, took him to Iran. And once again, they paraded that on their TV. Like that's how sure they are that nothing will happen to them. Nobody will put them in court. Nobody will lash out to them. And they were right. The German government was completely silent when they showed he was kidnapped and taken to Iran. They showed him blindfolded on TV, like it was just horrific. America was completely silent. The US administration was completely silent. And we were, once again, on our own, defending the rights of a citizen that was snatched by terrorists.
Who was president at that time?
When he was taken, it was the Trump presidency in the end of it. It was the pandemic. He was just fighting this and that. So it was a horrific time. It was just going into the elections. Nobody was paying attention to Iran, human rights, or anything. And then it went over like right away, 4 months later, into 4 years of the Biden administration, which of course are so engaged with the Islamic regime. We had no chance in the world to get our word out there. But we tried. We had
what did you do
in front of the. I mean, from the basics of, like, of course, writing letters to representatives and engaging the whole diaspora. We had sit-in strikes in front of the State Department, specifically when the Biden administration did a hostage deal with the Islamic regime, where they gave them $6 billion for 5 hostages. They left back at least 3 hostages that I know. One of them, my father, who at that time had a death sentence. So that was the only hostage that the regime saw as a threat. That was the only hostage that has a death sentence and that the regime vowed to murder. And it was absolutely, like, beyond us to understand, why would you give billions of dollars to save hostages, right? You're saying you want to save hostages and leave the one hostage whose life is in danger behind, and you don't even talk about it. So it became very clear that this was not a coincidence. That, yeah, it was a deliberate deal. Unfortunately, our governments are so infiltrated that they were complicit in silencing us, complicit in the murder of my father. And here we are today, almost 5 years later.
We've heard that your father was involved with a terrorist attack in Iran, and they even showed footage of him admitting that he was responsible, or actually he was the one who directed that act. What's your take on that?
First of all, this is a lie. There's no footage of him admitting to anything like that. There's footage of him actually in court when the Islamic regime brings him into the kangaroo courts, and people have to understand, this is not a real court. This is not a real judge. This is not a real law. Like, the laws are Sharia laws. He was not put on the stand for terrorism, like they claim in their things. He was put on trial for corruption on earth, whatever that means. You know, it is war against God, corruption on earth. So they have these, like, catch-all phrases that they apply to dissidents to silence them. And before they can do that, before they assassinate you physically, they do something called character assassination. That means somebody who is a threat to them, they go out with their 150,000 man strong cyber army, putting out disinformation, putting out campaigns to make this person that is a freedom fighter, that is standing up for the rights of people, turn them into that bad person. It's called mirror propaganda. So whatever we say the regime is doing, the regime is a terrorist, they say you are a terrorist. When you say the regime is killing people, they say you are killing people. The regime is a threat, they say you are a threat to national security. So this is very common for the regime to do. When you're a dissident and a journalist for a very long time, like almost 20 years for my father, they have more time to label you and do all of those things. Mm-hmm. What is important to understand, we have ways of looking at facts. We, of course, reached out to the UN groups of working group of arbitrary detention, which is a big lawyer team of lawyers who work at the UN, who investigated, and they investigated for 2 years. Took them a very long time. But in 2022, they came to the declaration that my father was arbitrarily detained, kidnapped, that the Islamic regime took him illegally, and that all the claims they made are baseless, and that my father was actually kidnapped and silenced because he was executing his right of freedom of expression and freedom of press. So we have UN bodies, government bodies, we have NGOs, we have politicians that clearly state that everything the Islamic regime is putting out there are lies. Yet the media likes to still take what the regime, what the terrorists, what the liars, what the murderers of my father are saying, and putting them as fact. Yeah. Even if they don't put them as fact and put it as quotation, every time you take that propaganda and put it next to my father, you're labeling my father as such. And that is also deliberate, to take these lies and slander my father, even though we have the UN just last week come out one more time and condemn the murder of my father, condemn the kidnapping of my father. One more time, they stated that he was just executing his right of expression and freedom of speech. So we have UN bodies versus terrorists. So it is very, very infuriating when you see the press still printing and talking about all of these lies that they bring out.
Why do you think that it's like that? Why do you think that media collaborates with terrorist regime in Iran instead of the truth? What's in it for them?
That's a good question. The way you asked it, what's in it for them? A lot of things are in it for them. Besides the ones that are just uninformed, uneducated, and don't do their job of investigative journalism, which is very rare now, like actually searching for the truth. They just copy paste what somebody else wrote and put it out there. The Islamic regime has used these last 46 years that they're in power to infiltrate Western governments. They understood very quickly after they took over Iran and took over Syria and other parts of the Middle East, that Western governments, you can't take them over with a coup. You have to crumble them from within. So the structures that they built up, and one of them was just exposed in 2023 by Iran International and Semaphore, is called the Iran Experts Initiative. So they're sending out experts that are working for the Islamic regime to work in our Pentagon, to work in our prestigious universities, to work in our academia, in our think tank. What did these people do for the last decades? They educate the next generation of journalists, of policymakers, of anybody, of judges, of all our society. So they brainwash our society. They infiltrate them with wrong propaganda, with lies, with expert advice that is always actually the bidding of the regime. What do they get out of it? They get deals out of it. They get, for example, the 2015 JCPOA, the Obama deal, which opened up sanctions relief, $150 billion in frozen assets and new contracts with Boeing and Nokia. What do they do with that money besides their terrorism? And they reinvest it into these institutions that we have in the West, media, academia, and everything. So it's a loophole. It's a cycle of getting money and getting people to dictate to them what makes the news, who to listen to, what is true and what is not true, what information to focus on, especially when it's coming from the regime. It's printed there. When it's coming from the dissidents, from the victims, from the freedom fighters, from journalists, from the even UN lawyers, look away. We didn't see that. So it's a mix of infiltration, of manipulation, and people who are paid to do that. And we can see it since October 7th very, very clearly how they've played this game in the Israel-Gaza war, how they've played this game in the Iranian dissidents, how they've played this game before for Russia, before Putin invaded the Ukraine. We could see like a lot of pro-Putin information was put out in our media. And now that we have cut ties with Putin, it is slowly fading out and more truth is coming out. But it's not personal. That's what I learned. It's not personal. It's business, infiltration, money, and all of those things.
Lots of people in Europe invest. They don't want to see that. They look very differently to Gaza and Israel conflict as we do. We Iranians, we have other take on that because we have lived it. We know how terrorists work. But people here, they still say that they still say lots of things that I don't agree with them. But do you think that everybody invest is bought to terrorists in Iran? Do you think that? Do you think that money from terrorist regime in Iran has bought all of the organizations in the world? Because it seems like that.
Not. I don't think everybody is bought, but everybody is manipulated by the money that is spent. So it's not like everybody who comes and speaks out and happens to say what the regime is saying is bought by them. As an example, I was growing up in Western society in Europe and Germany, which is very leftist, and I was wearing Che Guevara t-shirts and Che Guevara heads and all of that stuff. I didn't know what that meant. To be very honest, I had no idea. It was something that was cool. I didn't understand communism. I didn't understand the threats. I didn't understand the politics behind it. The same way that I didn't understand what I was doing. And I was lucky enough to have a father and very good people around me who educated me what that actually means. The same way they're manipulating our society, our media, our academia, our students, like you see like these mass students coming out and pretty much like advocating for something that is against their own interest, against their own safety, advocating for a terrorist organization that would kill them within a second. We saw that in Iran, we saw that in Syria, we see that in Afghanistan, how the terrorists come in, take every right of every woman away, She can barely breathe there. There's hundreds of laws. In Sudan, how the jihadists are killing and doing actual genocide. So these people who are so passionate about what they think is the Palestinian cause, why do they think they're not as passionate about the Sudanese genocide, the Yazidis genocide, the women of Afghanistan, the women of Iran? Because media doesn't present it to them. If media would 24/7 show you the slaughter of, we just had Christian slaughters in the Middle East, they would show that to our generation, to our public, they would be outraged about that. But when the media headquarters is controlling what you see, what pain you see, what suffering you see, and then tell you whose fault that is, which is not right, you are manipulated. Your emotions are manipulated, and everybody gets manipulated. Even us, we get manipulated when we see that footage, right? But we have to understand that just because media engages in that and presents that to you, that we still have as citizens the duty to investigate, the duty of using our brain, of critical thinking, and understanding root causes, understanding solutions, aside from our pain. I can always act on my pain. I can always go right now and hate whatever. But this is what differentiates us from barbarism, right? Like we're fighting barbarism. We're fighting savagery. We're not partaking in it. So when you're coming out and putting that hate and think this is activism, like most of the stuff that we see on the streets is hate towards Jews, is hate towards Israel. It's just hate. It's not love for people. It's not finding solutions. So when you understand you're manipulated and your emotions are manipulated, it gives you the chance to stop that and to assess. And when you assess, you have to have the chance to listen to the truth, to facts that you can check. And that's where we come in. That's where your program comes in, showing the other side and showing you how the regime is manipulating. So again, not everybody is bought, but everybody is manipulated by the money that is circulating there.
Every slaughter is wrong. In Sudan, it's wrong, but it's also wrong in Israel and Palestine. We've seen yesterday with the bodies of dead hostages who brought back to Israel, 2 little children were dead, and one of them hasn't even had a birthday that he could celebrate. It was very painful for me, but we have lots of people on internet that they say now Israel has killed 70,000 children in Palestine. So why do you think that these 2 are more important and more precious than those 70,000 children? Every lost life is painful. But I don't like whataboutism. But I have to ask you this: why should we cry for these 2? Meanwhile, I heard that there are 70,000 children who has been dead or has been slaughtered by Israel. I was nauseous when I talk like this, but I know that people will ask this from us. So what's your answer on that?
These questions are very hard to answer without going to emotions. And I try to, again, stay out of emotions because emotions cloud my mind. And first of all, every life is precious. That is absolutely clear. Every slaughter is horrific. Wars are horrific. But words have meaning. And we cannot just use words because we feel this pain and we want to throw them around. So when we say Israel slaughtered, like it's emotionally charged. Any war is a human rights atrocity because war, people die. Israeli soldiers die. Israeli children die. Palestinians die. Palestinian children die. Ukrainians die. Russians die. War is horrific. There's no way around it. But the words that we choose have meaning. So this is not a slaughter. This is the horrific effect of having war. And war is not something that any country, any society that is healthy seeks. War is something that people in power seek, that have an agenda of slaughter, death, and manipulation. And once you understand that the DNA of jihadism is based on this war doctrine of terrorism, of killing people, of slaughtering, of showing their power, of having no value for their own life. That's why you would do suicide bombings or any other person's life. Then we can put it a little bit in perspective. We do not choose war. Whether in Iran or Israel or Palestinian children, they do not choose war. But there is a cancer inside of Gaza, inside of Iran, inside of Lebanon, that chooses that and deliberately chose that on October 7th to come out and declare war. This was a break of a ceasefire. This is a declaration of war when you invade a country and you take civilians as hostages and slaughter them. This is a declaration of war that they caused. And anybody who is against war, anybody who wants to protect civilians has a duty to bring in solutions instead of saying blah, 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 so and this whataboutism and so many people here. First of all, we never quote numbers by terrorist groups. As I just said, terrorist lies. There is no war where we know exactly the number of civilian death in an instant. Ask right now how many people in the Ukraine died. They can't tell you. Ask how many died in the World War. We could tell you afterwards. Millions and millions of civilians in Germany died because of the war. But we had to do the war because we had a cancer called Nazism and Hitler in place that was taking over the world, slaughtering Jews, slaughtering children. And this is actual slaughter. This is actual genocide. You couldn't hold them back in any other form. We had to invade Germany. We had to bomb every single city of my country, of Germany, and pretty much destroy it, children, everything. We had to do that because the Nazis left us no choice. These jihadists leave us no choice. It's not a choice by us, we want to go and do that. We have seen for the last years, intifada after intifada, war after war of the Arab countries against the Israeli state. There is no going back. There is no alternative. We tried the ceasefires. We tried the negotiations. We tried this is a two-state solution. All of those things. When you have a cancer that would not adhere to that, this is the outcome of it. What can we do when we are in this horrific situation of war, of destruction, of hostage taking, of all of those things? Finding solutions. One solution would have been the immediate evacuation of civilians. We brought that to the public and we said, you have to ask for a resolution. Where is NATO? NATO came in the Yugoslavian war, in the Syrian war, evacuated hundreds of thousands of Syrians out of their homes because there was war, because they wanted to protect them. But in this case, what did NATO do? Nothing. What did the UN do? Nothing. Israel had to go out of their way and try to push people into safe zones to be able to take out Hamas while their soldiers, foot soldiers, were being killed, while their hostages were dying, while their hostages were kept there for over a year without the international community coming together and putting pressure on Hamas. So we had so many ways of making this horrific situation better, but we chose not to. We chose to have this voice of jihadism tell us so many children died and it's Israel's fault. So many is going on. So this brainwashing of us has to stop at some point. What we saw yesterday, if people are not horrified by the jihadists coming together in the celebratory things of having dead toddlers on stage, propaganda pictures behind them, and getting their children to applaud this. If people are not horrified, I don't know what to say. If people don't understand that these children in Gaza that were chanting on the stage, that this is child abuse, this is decades of jihadist manipulation, exploitation of Gazan children to brainwash them into celebrating death. if they are not hurt by that, if they don't want to destroy this machinery of jihadism to protect these children, then what are they talking about? Then they don't care about the children of Gaza. They don't care about anything. This is then just a projection of hate, what I'm seeing.
Why do you think that NATO did nothing to help people in Gaza? Why did they do that?
Everything again comes back to the big network that the Islamic regime and jihadists from the Muslim Brotherhood, which Hamas is part of it, and the Shia part of it, which is the Islamic regime and their proxies, have created. It is in the UN. We saw it in these ICC courts. We saw it in all of the decisions that the UN is doing, like electing right now the Islamic regime into their chair of the Human Rights Council. People don't pay attention to that. Like, we just elected a regime that systematically oppresses women, that slaughters children, shoots them in the eye, rape, mass executions in Iran, genocide, degree executions in Iran, kidnapping of foreign citizens and murdering them. And we elected them in the UN to the Human Rights Council. They are upholding human rights for the world. So I don't have to explain you, just for this example, how infiltrated, unfortunately, our government, our world organizations have become. They have become a tool of these jihadists that they use to maintain their power, to make their bidding on their advance. And this is horrific. The UN was not created for that. The UN was created to uphold human rights. And here we are, so many years later. And it goes into the Western governments, it goes into the NATO, it goes into the complicity of the European countries. And it all, again, I have to say it comes back to money. When you have big companies, when you have conglomerates that want to maintain their business ties to jihadists, this money speaks louder than human rights. You saw right now what happened in Syria. The Assad regime, thankfully, it was a genocidal regime, was toppled. But who toppled it? HTS. Who's HTS? HTS is the remainders of al-Nusra, which is from Al-Qaeda. So Al-Qaeda are the ones, Osama bin Laden, who were able to hijack planes with civilians in them and fly them into towers in America, the biggest terrorist massacre of our times, pretty much. They took over and they declared themselves the transitional government of Syria. Nobody voted for them. Meanwhile, they're slaughtering the Christians there. They're slaughtering the Kurds there. They're slaughtering the Druze there. No media coverage of that.
No,
that this is happening.
Human right doesn't exist then. No, I know.
It does not exist. And what did our governments do? Germany, France, and the US sent their delegations to speak with al-Jilani, who, by the way, at that time had a $10 million bounty by the State Department on his head. So we were putting money on his head to kill him because he's such a danger to humanity. And our delegation went out there. The Biden administration took away the $10 million bounty. And what were they doing there? Talking about human rights? No, they're securing their next connections, business deals, everything that they can do to maintain power of these jihadists. And you think this is out of a dystopia, but this is the world that we live in right now. And why do we not see it? Because media doesn't show it. Why? Because media is infiltrated by these same powers and these same manipulators and these same companies that they have an interest of not showing us that. Yeah.
You talked about IRGC. IRGC in Iran has been named as a terrorist organization, but what I don't understand is that the same countries that they call IRGC a terrorist organization, they invite the president of Iran, they invite all the people from the government from Iran to their country, and they roll out red carpet for them. But who pays IRGC? Who is the commander? It's stupid. Do you think that this is a plan?
Obviously. I mean, like, one person, I think it was an Iranian, gave a very good example. He said, when you have to take your final exams in Iran, if you want to get every single answer wrong, you have to actually know the right answer for every single question in order to avoid that one and get every single answer wrong. What that means is when you see governments, institutions, and all of those things around the world, for 45 years or 46 years now, getting it wrong every time. At what point do we say, they're not stupid, but this is deliberate, you know? You cannot make the wrong choices over and over and over again. We're not the only smart people in the world who are seeing that this is wrong. You put them on the terrorist list and then you invite them over there. You say this is a terrorist organization and then you invite them to the Human Rights Council. You say you condemn everything that they're doing. They shouldn't kill my father. But then what are you doing about that? You know, we're not the only smart people. Our politicians are smart too. Our media is smart too. So at some point we have to stop saying this is stupid. This is a mistake. And we have to point out this is deliberate. You have an interest in doing that. Stop your interest. This is what you can do instead. And this is also what I always put out because it's important for these money cartels to understand. You want to make money. You know, these conglomerates, these money institutions, these bankers, they don't have a political motivation. They don't care if Hitler is in power, Khomeini is in power, Khamenei is in power, whatever. They don't have a political interest. They have an interest in making money. So when you can show them an alternative that you can make money without having your hands bloody at the same time, without engaging with powers that murder not just the people in the Middle East, but also Europeans. Also, they're coming here into our streets and doing terrorist plots against American presidents, against journalists, against the Iranian diaspora. So when you can show them the alternative, that is when we catch their attention. And that is where our movements of getting the people on the ground in Iran, in Syria, in Lebanon, in all over the Middle East where jihadists are in power right now, giving them a voice to reclaim their country, to create the governments that they want, which are pro-West, which are pro-democracy, which are pro-human rights. That is where these organizations will then shift to our side and say, okay, here's an alternative where we can still make money. They can make billions of dollars with Iran, with a free Iran. And that will be in their advantage.
You've already answered this, but I want to ask it one more time. Western politicians still treat Iran as a negotiation partner rather than a terrorist state. Why do you think that the West is so weak when it comes to Iran? Meanwhile, they know that if Iran is a free country, they still can make money from Iran, but the world will be safer. Why don't they choose for that?
They don't choose for that for two reasons. One reason is when you make a contract with somebody and you have your broker regime, you have established this relationship. So somebody from a European company has talked to somebody from Khamenei's regime to have a certain amount of deal, $50 billion for whatever business they have. They don't want to lose that. So for them, a change in that regime, a change in whoever is in power is a major inconvenience because now they have to think, can I get the same contract back? Can I get the same advantage back? And so on. So anytime you have change, it's a very big inconvenience for these money cartels that are out there. Second reason is, of course, what I explained before, the propaganda machine of the Islamic regime telling these companies we will never be able to do that. If we are not here, Iran will be infiltrated by everything. It will become an Iraq, so they're threatening them and they're telling them, oh, this is very unstable. This is not a good business decision for you to do. Nothing to do, again, with human rights. It's just business and money decisions. Don't do that. And actually, the third reason is when you have a power, an organization and power that is not from the country, they exploit that country. So that's why we always say the Islamic regime are not an Iranian regime. It's the Islamic regime. They are not Iranian because they have no interest in Iranians. They are the ancestors of the Arab Islamists that came over, and they proudly say that. They don't speak even our language. They put Arabic on our flag. So they're Arab invaders, to make it short, and the Iranians see them as such. So when you, as a foreign invader, take over the country, you exploit their resources. So they're selling our oil for cheap to China, no real government would do that. So these outside sources like China and Europe, they're benefiting from cheap stuff that they get that
Exactly.
they wouldn't get if Iran was actually led by the Iranian people, who, like any other country, would not want to sell out everything that they have and suffer, but they would want an equal share in any kind of negotiation. So again, it is kind of an exploitation of Western powers of the Middle East and of Africa and of many other places that they do that for money benefits. And that is something that where we have to see what kind of country do we want to be. Do we want to be one that exploits Middle Eastern countries and other countries for our own financial good? Or do we want to be one that is first interested in human rights, stability, because everything that happens in the Middle East will happen in Europe. They're not stopping there. They're like Hitler's regime that wants to invade everywhere. What is more important for us? And until now, it was more important for the European and American and Western countries to have more money and more power. But now that they see that their own students are infiltrated their own schools, that jihadism, the intifada is on our streets in Holland, in Berlin, in France, in England, in Canada, in Australia, I think it's a wake-up call that we did this very, very wrong. We did a very wrong choice, and we have no more choice. We have no more choice in holding them back than to reverse it. First, we have to stop all investments, all money, all trade with the Islamic regime. Then we have to put them on the terrorist list everywhere, not just the IRGC. The Ministry of Intelligence is huge. They're the ones that do all of the assassination plots of politicians in Europe, of journalists in Europe, of Jewish kindergartens and all of those things. The entirety of the Islamic regime has to be on a terrorist list, has to be sanctioned, they have to be frozen, and that weakens the regime. And then we have to stabilize and support the people on the ground that will take over and establish a democratic state in Iran that will be a domino effect in the entire Middle East. That is the effect that Iran has in the Middle East. So once you liberate Iran, the rest will be liberated.
Exactly. But lots of people in Europe and in the United States, they don't see it like that. They see a country who is becoming stronger and stronger. I don't agree with them, but I'm telling you what's the point of view of people who I talk and argue with them all the time. They see a country that is becoming stronger. I think they mistake the aggression and terrorist attacks with power. But they say now Iran is getting stronger and United States is not happy about that. That's why they want to demonize regime in Iran. How can I explain it to them that it's not like that?
They are probably unfamiliar with the thinking and the reaction of jihadists. So jihad is like a injured hyena will scratch anytime they feel that they're going to be destroyed. So the Islamic regime is at its last breath. I don't know what their arguments are for saying that the Islamic regime is strong, but it has been the weakest since it was created, since they took over Iran and occupied it. You can see that in many different things. One of it is, of course, we had the elections last year. We call them selections, actually, because there are no real elections. The people boycotted the elections. Why did they boycott the elections? To show they cannot go on the street and say, we don't want the Islamic regime, because they get shot in the eye and murdered. So in order to show how many people, like kind of a referendum, are against the regime, they said we will boycott. And based on that, we can show how many people are for the regime, how many against. The numbers speak volume. 90% of the people boycotted the election. That means 90% of the people declared to the regime, we are against you. That threatens the regime to its core. The way they are executing people right now, which is an execution wave, every 6 hours, one freedom fighter is hanged to death. This is a genocide happening and nobody's paying attention to it. But you have to pay attention to it because they are deliberately doing it. Why are they doing it? Because while you're looking away, they're taking out the army that will take them out. These are people who came to the streets, people who have networks of people who can organize strikes, labor workers, like everybody that they're threatening, they're taking them out one by one by one by one. This is a sign of weakness and threat. You can see, of course, how their proxies have been taken out. Hamas is to its knees right now. Hezbollah was, I mean, we saw the pager events and everything that they've done over there. The complete leadership was taken out. They were weakened to its core. Syria, they have lost their partner in Syria, which was the Assad regime. So globally, they're being ostracized. They're being weakened. And they are pushing for a deal. They are not saying it. They would never say it. They always say, we don't want a deal. We don't want a deal. But that's when we look at their lobby groups. One of them is NAYAC, for example, in Washington. Yeah. And many of their journalists and what I talked about before, the Iran Experts Initiative, which one of them is, for example, Adriana Tabatabai, who is part of this initiative, according to Semaphor's research. She works in the Pentagon, and she just published an article convincing President Trump to do a negotiation because Iran is such a nuclear threat and all of that stuff that they've told us since the 90s. And if you don't do a deal, they will build this nuclear bomb and all of those ridiculous things that will never stop nuclear ambitions by the regime and just give them billions of money. You can see how they are pushing yes. in Europe and in America for this deal. They are desperate because if they don't get that deal, they are done. They're financially
They have done. Nowhere to go.
The Trump administration with maximum pressure will take off all revenue that they can come, and they will come to an end. So I would have to hear their arguments of why they think the Islamic regime is strong right now. No, it's the complete opposite.
I think the only reason that the Islamic regime in Iran is still there, it's the Western world, governments, who they negotiate with them. And that's the only reason that they are still on power. And they are still killing our youth in Iran. They are still killing our people. And I think that people in Europe and in the United States, everywhere in the world, actually the governments, they should be ashamed of themselves. Yeah, it's painful.
If they had shame, that would be very good. Unfortunately, those politicians that have shame, that have values, are never promoted by these monies and promotions. You know, that kind of money that the Islamic regime reinvests, they invest that into campaigns for people that are on their sides. You know, here's your villa, here's your campaign, here's your TV show. And that's how these people get promoted and come into power and become the European, I don't know, highest representative or whatever.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, this is no coincidence. We know his track record of business ties that he has to these jihadists. And it in these times, you know, you can do a Google search and find all of that stuff out. So it's no longer, before they said, oh, these are conspiracy theories and this and that. We now have proof, we have research, we have documents that show all of that. It is just the switch from us knowing it to getting the broad population, which does not know that, to understand that. And that will take immense work, but that's what we're here for, to educating our people. Because, again, it is not just the people of Iran who are dying. This is the most, first of all, anti-Semitic organization ever. Jews in all of our Europe and Western countries are not safe right now. They're not safe to come to the streets. And this should shock you as anybody, as a Muslim, as a Christian, as anybody, because first it's them, then it's somebody else. We have to protect each other. We can't say, oh, the Nazis or the white supremacists only kill Black people. What do I care? No, you have to defend them. Like this is just like the basic values that we have lost in our society and that are completely gone through these kinds of manipulations. But I believe in the people, especially in your people and your country, who uphold human rights. I mean, who are part of their history is to uphold human rights and have diverse people and have diverse that. We just have to wake them up to the reality of the truth, because you cannot see it when you're constantly brainwashed by media. You cannot see it, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. That's the good thing about the truth. Once you see the truth, you can no longer unsee it.
Your patience is unbelievable. But you know, lots of people in Europe, they don't know that in Islamic belief, Shia, actually, they believe that their 12th Imam will come back to earth when all the Jews are murdered.
If you go into the belief system and everything, it gets very, very complicated. But let me say it this way. It's not the problem of Islam. There is a discussion about that. There's a discussion about all of those things, which will come at some point. Besides Islam, there is something when we say jihadism, I don't say like the Muslim regime of Iran. I say the Islamic regime. That's what they call themselves, the Islamic Republic.
Exactly.
This is political Islam. And jihad is a war doctrine. That means indoctrination with a purpose of elimination and a purpose of expansion and a purpose of power. So the biggest cult that you can imagine with oil money, that is what we're facing right now. The Hitler regime with oil money. So it is a huge threat to our existence right now. And we have looked away for a very, very, very long time. And again, the expansionist movement of the jihadists, whether it's the Muslim Brotherhood or the Islamic regime, it is expansionist. It is conquering the entire world. So they will not stop at Israel. They will not stop at Iran. They didn't stop at Afghanistan. They didn't stop at Syria. They didn't stop. When we go back in history, this is the continuation of the Ottoman Empire and the Muslim conquest back then. They came to Spain. You know, it was just because the Spanish people were so good at pushing them back that Spain right now is not the Islamic Republic of Spain, but it is Spain still. But the rest of us, they were able to conquer. So we have to learn from history. We have to learn. We have to understand when they're showing us their true faith, when they're showing us that they want to take over the world, they actually mean that. And they have shown that. So it is our duty to combine forces and to stop them and to illegalize jihadism. That is another thing that people are so afraid of. When we destroyed the Nazi regime in my home country, Germany, we had at least 5 years of denazification. That means banning their signs, banning their ideology, banning all of that stuff, because we understood what kind of a murderous genocidal threat that was to all humanity. We have to do the same thing with jihadism, fascism, communism, like Stalinism, like these extreme forms. They are threats to human rights everywhere, and they have to be treated as such, not as a belief, not as a faith, not as a culture. They say like the Palestinians' culture. It's not their culture. It's a jihadist movement coming and brainwashing their children to turn them into suicide bombers, into child soldiers, into human shields. This is abuse and exploitation. This is against every at least 5 points of international law that they're breaking there. So this is where we have to come together and say, stop this, if we care about human rights.
If you could directly speak to the leaders of the world, what would you say to them?
To the leaders of the world, the good ones that actually want to do good, and are surrounded by teams of jihadist networks that tell them whatever the agenda of the Islamic regime is. You have a once-in-a-lifetime chance to change history. The Islamic regime in Iran is not just there for 46 years. This is a war that the Middle East and the world has been fighting for 1,400 years, since the birth of Islamization, since they came over and took away land, communities, identities in the whole of the Middle East. All of these indigenous people were crushed, oppressed, their identity taken, Islamized, oppressed, murdered up until today. So this is a continuation of something historic that has been going on for millennia. We're at a point where you can make the change of ending that. This is as important as the fall of the Soviet Union. This is as important and historic as the fall of the Third Reich, Hitler's regime. This is the moment that you can make history. You can take initiative and be part of this and go into history as a legend of ending the third threat that we have after these two things, which is jihadism. And there is no better time than right now. The people are behind you. This needs structure. It is a hard war to be fought, but it is the right side of history. So speak to us and speak to the communities. If you're a leader of a Western nation, speak to the people of Iran directly. Don't invite their tormentors and the torturers and the kidnappers. Speak to them, invite them, bring them together, strengthen them. And same with all the other nations in the Middle East. Let them bring together. We are on the verge of creating a new baby Earth, pretty much, a new civilization, a new culture in the Middle East that will spread freedom, democracy, prosperity for all of us. If you want to be part of this, you have to make the choice right now. If you don't want to be a part of this, no longer talk about human rights, no longer talk about values, no longer talk about democracy, equality, women's rights. When you are part of this, you're strengthening regimes that take away every right of every child, every person, every minority, and everything. You have no longer the right to talk about those things in our democracies, and we will show you that you have no place in our politics, because we, the people of these countries, for us, these values count. For us, these people are our heroes and need to be protected, and it's your job to protect us and protect them.
Are you safe, Gazelle? Do you feel safe?
Never. No, I'm not. I haven't been safe since 2009, since they sent their first assassins to Los Angeles. Since that time, I'm a little paranoid. Since then, you get used to like looking over their shoulder, looking who's outside of your house, what kind of car, where do I go, who's contacting me. So I'm a little bit getting used to that. If you can get used to knowing that there's an organization any minute that wants to murder you or kidnap you or poison you or do anything like that. I'm absolutely not safe. I'm a little bit more safe in America than in Europe. So my trip to Berlin, where I'm going to hopefully see my father's remains, I'm going to need a security team, which Germany finally agreed to provide. Last time I was in Berlin, we had to pay $20,000 to an NGO to get security for me. This time the German government said they will provide that, hopefully. And that comes with it. That comes with the job of speaking up or being so insane that you think you can take up the fight with a terrorist network that has billions of dollars and influence everywhere. But I'm not alone. I have so many people all over the world that are doing the fight with us and helping us. And I know I am more safe the more visibility I have. That's why I go into media all the time, because when somebody who's not known is kidnapped, they can do anything with them and nobody cares. There's no accountability. When somebody who's known is kidnapped and something happens to them, it has a higher price for them. So I'm trying to bring the price of harming me up, if that makes any sense. And that's the weird sci-fi reality that I'm living now.
I would love to invite you to come to the Netherlands to talk to Dutch people and to share your knowledge and your wisdom with Dutch people. But I know that your security comes first. So people who are watching us, if you can help to raise enough money to make Gazelle safe in the Netherlands, please help us. Because I think that people in Europe, they have to hear you. They need to hear you. And we do everything to let your voice be heard. I also want to mention your necklace. It's a very beautiful necklace, and I know that it has a special meaning for you. Do you want to share that with us?
Yes, of course. This is I put this on the day, on October 28th, when the regime announced that they had murdered my father. This is the pin that my father always had on his jacket when he was talking in his radio show. When he was anywhere in public, he would hold us. What you see on it is called the Darafsh Kabyani, or the Standard of Kabyani. It is a mythological flag. It is one of the oldest flags of Iran. It is the symbol of revolution, and the revolution of the people against tyranny. So in this mythological story, Kaveh Ahangar is an ironsmith who lives in Iran, in mythological Iran. And there is this villain, this horrific villain, who eats children for breakfast. So it's a a fable. And when he eats the children of Kaveh, the blacksmith, he takes off his apron and he puts it on a spear and he holds it up. So this is actually his apron that you see on there. And the people of Iran rally behind him. And he forms this revolution of pure people against this tyrant, and they're able to take out the tyrant. So it has very much a lot of meaning to the people of the Middle East and people of Iran. When they see this flag, it means empowerment of the people. It means empowerment of those that are oppressed, that go up against huge tyrannical powers, but they can do it and they will be free. So you see it very, very often. And now that I showed it to you, when you look at the Iranian rallies, you will see the Iranian flag with a lion and sun, but you will also see in the forefront somebody holding up the standard of Kaveh. It means to us freedom. It means to us even if you take our life, if you even take my loved one from me, his spirit, his willingness, his essence will live on through us. And that's what the people of Iran show. When you murder one of their children, when you murder one of them, 100 people in their family stand up. And when I put this on, thousands and thousands of people around the world reached out and they were sharing my video as I was a simple video of putting this on and standing there, and showed their solidarity. We are with you. We are standing with you. And it's giving me a lot of hope. It puts me very close to my dad, and we'll carry it until we're done, until we will be done with this regime and they will be no more.
And a safer world. Exactly. If you could speak to the world, what do you want people of the world to understand about what happened to your father?
There are very few people in the world who would risk their own safety, security, let alone their time, their health, or their life for a cause bigger than them. So you may not know my father, but you know other people in history like Václav Havel or Nelson Mandela, whoever is your hero. We have some heroes that we look at in awe because they bring up the strength to do what is right, even though they're slandered, even though their life is in danger, even though they're sick. Like my father had Parkinson's, and he would still come in front of the camera to speak, because they see themselves in a role that is bigger themselves, bigger than their life. And they see the consequences of it, threats, their children in danger, everything in danger, finding themselves in the most horrific situation when your enemy that wants to murder you keeps you, gets you, kidnaps you, has you in their hand, tortures you for years, tortures you, and you're still standing up and you're still not losing yourself and you're still fighting until your last breath. It's just these people, I don't know how my father got like that, but they're very rare. Sorry, a little bit. Not all of us can be like them, but we have thousands like my father in Iran who do that every day. They're not seen. They go on the streets and they face the rifle of an IRGC mercenary, and they stand in their face with nothing and they get shot. So we have an entire nation of these kind of people. They are just so valuable to me, so valuable, because if the regime takes them out, if we get to the point where they're so weakened that nobody stands up anymore, what do we have left? What do we have left in this world when we don't protect those that protect us? So I'm asking you, not for me, not for my father, but just for the values of this world that we want to live in. Speak up about these people. Give them the honor that these regimes want to take away with slander, with propaganda, with killing them in cold blood and giving them his casket. Show them our values versus their values. And that's all I'm asking. Be our voice.
Dutch people and people in Europe help you. What do you want us to do? What should our next step be to help you with your father, to get your father back home?
We've already started the Justice for Jimmy campaign, which is not just justice for my father, but justice for all of those that have been slain or tortured or killed by the terrorists. step by step, we're going forward. The first thing that is happening that we already were able to do is an autopsy on my father. Based on that autopsy and the cause of death, we will now have the opportunity to have a lawsuit against the Islamic regime. That means instead of bringing them on red carpets and into our UN, we will bring them into courts. It's a very big shot. It has not been done before. But because my father is German and American, Germany has a duty to investigate. We need pressure, though, to make them investigate. We need pressure and we need people behind this cause to rally behind and say, this is your duty to hold these people that kidnap us accountable and not promote them to great positions and honor them with billions of dollars. So this is the first step. After we do that, what has to follow and what is very long overdue is an international tribunal where all of the regime agents are held accountable for their crimes against humanity. That involves everything that their proxy group has done, everything that they have done for 5 decades, almost half a century, almost everything that they're doing to the people in Europe, outside, in Iran, all over the world. It is very long overdue that we have them in a tribunal, very similar to the Nuremberg trials that we had after the Nazi regime. This has to happen to wrong everything that they have done. We need people who understand law, who understand lobbying in governments, who are close to the press, everyday people who can tweet, who can support that. This is something that involves a village, a whole world to come together and say, no more, we're holding them accountable. We're going to the UN, we're going to the ICC. If they're not doing it, the Hague doesn't want to do it. We push for it. We have our own tribunal. So we need a lot of involvement. This is a long, long journey that we have. We have to do it, though. This has to stop. There is no more turning back, no more negotiations, no more appeasement, no more. Maybe we can curb them. Maybe there is no more. There is no more. They will just go further and further. And if our governments don't stop them, we have to make our governments stop them because we elect our governments. We're not their servants. They have to serve us. They have to serve our interest. And if our interest is safety, and they're threatening that safety, then we have to lobby for it. And I hope everybody can pitch in and help us do that.
Well, where can they find a petition? Is that a petition that they have to sign, or should they send email? What are the concrete steps that we can take?
The concrete steps will come as soon as we still, again, we're waiting for the autopsy results, and then we will do that. But if you follow me on my Instagram account,
what's your Instagram account?
My Instagram is still free Jamshid Sharmahd. And my Twitter account or X account is Gazelle Sharmahd. And you can find me on there. You can also find our podcast, War and Freedom podcast, on YouTube, where I'm a co-host and we're talking about Middle Eastern issue. It is right now on hold a little bit and a little delayed because of the events that took place and the murder of my father. But this is something where people can understand more about the Middle East, more about the history, more about geopolitical situations, and be aware of the propaganda and the lies and just be educated on that. But we will build a portal, we will build petitions, and all of those things will come. And we're open to any kind of engagement. We don't want to limit this to the Iranian diaspora and people who care about Iran. This is everybody's issue. So NGOs in the Netherlands, in Europe, in everywhere are welcome to help us to build this portal, to find solutions for that and go forward to get justice for Jimmy and to stop the jihadists and put them where they belong, behind bars, in jail.
But we put the link to all your socials under this video. And
thank you. The most important thing, though, this is like one campaign that we're doing, which is the direction that we're going in. But the most important thing, everybody has voting power in their government. So when you see, and it's not about certain parties, but certain politicians that are advertising for more negotiation, for more appeasement, it's your job to hold them accountable. It's your job to tell them, this is not okay for me. We do not want you to engage with terrorists. We do not want you to engage in any form or way with people who are murdering children, murdering dissidents every single day. We do not stand behind this. And we have to be very vocal and very clear. So every election in your cities, in your countries, in the European Union, you have to push for that. And we have to make clear what has to happen after the kidnapping and murder of a European citizen is the complete stop of all diplomatic relations, pretty much what we did with North Korea should be done with the Islamic regime, completely isolate them politically, financially, and that's our first duty. We cannot still send money to the people that are murdering us. So any chance that you get, speak up, come together in groups, and make your politicians hear you, make your politicians understand we're not just indifferent about it. We are speaking up. This is not okay for us.
We'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything else that you want to share with Dutch people?
There's a lot to share, but we're already an hour. I would love to come back, and I would love to come and see you people, hopefully one day.
You're more than welcome.
It's more safe. Definitely. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being the ones that don't close your eyes and actually open your eyes, open your ears, and hear other perspectives and want to strive for really what matters, human rights and freedom all over the world.
Thank you.
Rest.